Thomas Pritchard had never anticipated an invitation like this. Just a week earlier, a formal-looking envelope had arrived at his modest apartment containing a message that almost seemed like a joke. He was invited to a prestigious charity gala in the heart of the city, an extravagant event attended only by the wealthiest and most influential people in town. As a high school history teacher from a quiet town on the outskirts, he couldn't help but wonder if it was a mistake. But after double-checking the details several times, he realized it was legitimate. Someone somewhere had specifically asked for him to be there. Thomas had never been one for lavish parties or glamorous crowds. His life was simple, centered around early morning coffee, late-night grading, and the occasional weekend hike. Known as the quiet, small-town teacher dedicated to his students, he had little to do with the world of glitz and glamour. The invitation baffled him, yet it also intrigued him. Maybe, just this once, he thought, it wouldn't hurt to experience a different world. A world far removed from the simplicity of his daily routine. The invitation had sparked something in him, a curiosity, a sense of adventure. As the day of the event approached, he dug out his best suit, a decade-old navy blue one that had seen more weddings and funerals than he could count. He knew he wouldn't blend in with the high-class crowd, but he hoped his appearance would at least be presentable. The gala promised to be a night of opulence, but for Thomas, it was more about stepping outside his comfort zone. On the night of the event, he glanced at his reflection in the mirror before leaving. The man staring back was slightly worn by time, with a few streaks of silver in his hair, but his eyes still held a youthful spark. With a mix of nerves and excitement fluttering in his stomach, he stepped out of his apartment and made his way to the venue, determined to make the most of the evening, no matter how out of place he might feel. When he arrived, the sight was breathtaking. The grand hall was illuminated by chandeliers that sparkled like stars, casting a golden glow over an elegantly dressed crowd. He paused for a moment, feeling overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding him. It was as if every inch of the place whispered wealth and privilege. But he took a deep breath, reminded himself that he was there for a reason, and stepped into the world he had always been distant from. As Thomas walked further into the hall, he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. The laughter of the guests echoed, polished and practiced, while waiters in pristine uniforms weaved through the crowd, carrying trays laden with fine wine and hors d'oeuvres. Everyone seemed to belong, their designer dresses and polished shoes blending seamlessly with the grandeur of the room. For the first time, Thomas felt the full weight of being an outsider in a world he had only read about. With every step, his discomfort grew. He overheard groups chatting animatedly about stock markets, international travel, and grand business ventures, topics he could barely relate to. He reminded himself to smile politely, to nod if spoken to, but his awkwardness was painfully evident. Each attempt to join a conversation only highlighted the gulf between him and those around him. Just as he was beginning to wonder if coming here had been a mistake, he caught sight of her standing by the bar. Dressed in a stunning red gown was a woman whose elegance seemed to make the room revolve around her. Sophia Lancaster, a renowned socialite, was known for her impeccable sense of style and her icy demeanor. She glanced over at him, her eyes cold and assessing, as though trying to figure out what kind of man would dare step foot in such a place. Sophia's expression shifted from mild curiosity to quiet amusement as her gaze lingered on Thomas's worn suit and uncertain smile. In her world, appearances were everything, and Thomas clearly didn't measure up. With a smirk, she walked toward him, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "You look a little lost," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Thomas, feeling his face flush, forced a polite smile. "Just admiring the decor," he replied, hoping to brush off her remark. But her smirk deepened as she looked him up and down, her gaze lingering just long enough to make him feel small. "This isn't exactly a school trip," she added with a laugh, turning on her heel before he could respond. Thomas felt the sting of her words, the flush creeping up his neck. He tried to shake it off, reminding himself that he wasn't there to impress anyone. Still, the dismissive tone lingered in his mind. He attempted to immerse himself in the art on the walls, the stunning floral arrangements, and the soft melodies of the live orchestra. But no matter how hard he tried, Sophia's words have struck a nerve. As the evening wore on, he began to notice a few guests giving him curious glances, whispering among themselves. Whether they were talking about him or not, he couldn't say, but the weight of their judgment was palpable, making him wish he could disappear into the shadows. He told himself it didn't matter what they thought of him, but still the nagging doubt gnawed at him. Maybe he truly didn't belong here. As the night stretched on, Thomas found himself wandering toward the refreshment table, hoping a drink might calm his nerves. Just as he picked up a glass of water, he heard Sophia's voice behind him. "Are you still here?" she asked, her tone dripping with mock surprise. "I thought you'd have slipped out by now. People like you don't usually last long at events like these." Her words stung more than he wanted to admit. Thomas felt his patience wearing thin, but instead of snapping back, he chose to remain silent. He looked at her, meeting her mocking smile with quiet dignity. And in that silence, something shifted within him. He realized he didn't need to prove anything to her. The others around them continued laughing, oblivious to the silent battle unfolding between him and Sophia. Taking a deep breath, he broke the silence. "I'm here because I was invited," he said calmly, refusing to let her push him away, "not just as a guest. I was invited by one of the event's main benefactors, a friend who wanted me to be here." Sophia stood frozen for a moment, her smug expression faltering as she processed his unexpected revelation. Nearby guests, who had overheard their exchange, began to look at Thomas with renewed interest. Murmurs spread through the crowd, the air thick with speculation about who he really was. Sophia's mask of confidence slipped, replaced by a faint blush of embarrassment as her earlier assumptions unraveled before her. Trying to regain her composure, she forced a laugh. "Well, I didn't mean to offend you," she said, though her tone lacked sincerity. "It's just that this isn't exactly the kind of place you'd expect a teacher to be." But Thomas saw through her facade, recognizing that her arrogance was a shield for her own insecurities. He felt a pang of sympathy for her, but he didn't let it show. With quiet conviction, he met her gaze. "Maybe it's time you stop measuring people by where they come from or how much they have," he said gently. "You might find there's more to life than parties and prestige." His words caught her off guard, resonating in a way she hadn't expected. Though she tried to dismiss them, the seed of doubt had been planted. Thomas's words stirred a memory in Sophia, an image of her younger self, before wealth and status had hardened her heart. She remembered a time when kindness and humility had been part of her character, before she'd learned to hide behind arrogance and disdain. There had been struggles in her life too, moments she'd worked hard to bury. For a brief moment, she felt a wave of shame. Here stood a man who had come from humble beginnings, unafraid to be himself, while she had wrapped herself in a shell of superiority. Sophia tried to push the uncomfortable thoughts away, but they lingered, tainting her sense of pride. She retreated to the powder room, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. For the first time in years, she didn't recognize the person staring back at her in the mirror. Thomas's words had stirred something deep within her, dredging up a past she had long tried to bury. She couldn't shake the emptiness that gnawed at her, a stark reminder of the kindness she had lost along the way. As she reapplied her lipstick, her hands trembled slightly. She could keep playing the role of the confident socialite, but she now understood that it was merely a mask. A fragile one, at that, one that Thomas had managed to see right through. When Sophia returned to the hall, she was met with a series of curious glances. Word of her encounter with the quiet man in the worn suit had spread like wildfire, sparking a ripple of intrigue. To her surprise, she found Thomas engaged in conversation with none other than James Harland, one of the city's most respected businessmen and the event's main benefactor. James was a fixture at these galas, known not only for his wealth, but also for his remarkable kindness. James looked up as she approached, his expression warm. "Sophia," he greeted her with a smile. "I see you've met my good friend Thomas." Sophia froze. The realization hit her with the force of a blow. Thomas wasn't just some ordinary guest, he was someone James valued enough to invite personally. Her embarrassment flared, and she watched as James placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder, introducing him to others in the crowd. The evening reached its peak when the event organizer took the stage, inviting Thomas to speak. The crowd fell into a hushed silence, all eyes fixed on him, eager to understand who this man was and why he had been invited as an honored guest. Nervous but determined, Thomas took a deep breath and stepped forward. As he scanned the sea of faces, he caught sight of Sophia in the crowd. Her expression was a mix of tension and reluctant admiration. He began to speak not about wealth or success, but about the values that shaped him: humility, kindness, and the importance of helping others. He shared stories of his students, the children he taught every day, whose dreams of a better future he fought to make possible. His words resonated, filling the room with a quiet that seemed to carry more than just admiration. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. Her mind wavered between pride and a growing urge to apologize. As Thomas spoke, the weight of her earlier actions pressed down on her. The memory of mocking him now felt unbearably petty, but Sophia had built her life on appearances, and to humble herself in front of all these people seemed insurmountable. She wrestled with her choices. As Thomas's speech ended to a standing ovation, she hesitated, unsure of how to approach him. Finally, she managed a smile, one that felt strange and unsteady. "Your speech, it was very inspiring," she said, though her words lacked the conviction she had hoped to convey. Thomas nodded, his gaze calm and perceptive, sensing the internal conflict she struggled to hide. "Thank you, Sophia," he replied quietly, his tone warm but unassuming. Though he didn't comment on her discomfort, his acceptance of her compliment, so simple and composed, stung her in a way she hadn't expected. Sophia stood off to the side as others gathered around Thomas, eager to speak with him. He had become the center of attention, with people offering compliments and asking questions about his work. Her confidence wavered as she watched, realizing just how quickly he had earned the respect of everyone in the room. The evening had begun with her in the spotlight, but now, as the night wore on, she found herself standing in his shadow. The final blow came when she overheard a guest comment, "Sophia really needs to learn a thing or two from him." The words, though unkind, felt utterly justified in that moment. The small crowd parted and Thomas approached her once again. This time, there was no pity in his gaze, no condescension, only understanding. "We all have something to learn, don't we?" he said softly, giving her a chance to redeem herself. At last, Sophia found herself alone with Thomas in a quiet corner of the hall. "I was wrong about you," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The walls she had so carefully constructed around her pride began to crumble, leaving only honesty in their wake. "I thought respect had to be earned through achievements or status, but you don't need any of that." Thomas nodded, his gaze gentle yet firm. "Respect isn't something anyone needs to earn, Sophia. It's something we offer freely. Every person has a story, a struggle. Sometimes, all it takes is a little kindness to make a difference." His words lingered in the air, resonating deeply within her. For the first time, Sophia felt a glimmer of hope, a flicker of change. Maybe she could change. Maybe there was still time to rediscover the person she had once been. It wasn't too late. Inspired by their conversation, Thomas extended an unexpected invitation. "Come visit my town sometime," he said. "See the school where I work. Meet the kids. They're the real reason I'm here tonight." Sophia hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her mind, but something inside her urged her to say yes. It was a world she had never known, a place where kindness and hard work, not wealth or status, determined a person's worth. To her surprise, she nodded. "I think I'd like that," she said, her voice steady though she felt a mix of emotions. Thomas smiled, sensing her sincerity. "Good," he replied. "There's a lot to learn from people who may have little in terms of wealth, but a great deal in terms of heart." With that, he left her to reflect on his words, leaving her with a sense of both humility and hope. As the evening wore on and the gala came to a close, Thomas prepared to leave. His purpose had been fulfilled, not by the praise he'd received, but by the quiet satisfaction of staying true to himself. Sophia watched him walk away, an unfamiliar sense of loss tugging at her. In all her years, in all the places she'd been and people she'd met, she had never encountered someone like Thomas, someone so genuinely kind. The noise of the gala seemed to fade as she watched him disappear into the distance, as though he left behind a piece of himself that she couldn't quite grasp, yet felt deeply. In that moment, she knew meeting him had changed her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. Back at home, Thomas found comfort in the familiar simplicity of his small apartment, a stark contrast to the opulence of the gala. He thought about Sophia, the sharp remarks she had made, and how they had been replaced by something softer, more genuine. He could only hope that the night had planted a seed of change within her. As he settled into his evening, he reminded himself that his life's work was not about fame or recognition. His students, his family, his community, that was what mattered. And tonight, he felt an even stronger resolve to continue giving his best to those who needed him most, grateful for the quiet, purposeful life he had chosen. The morning after the gala, Sophia found herself in deep reflection. As she looked around her luxurious home, the comfort and opulence that had once been a source of pride now felt strangely empty. Thomas's words echoed in her mind, forcing her to confront the parts of her life she'd long ignored. Memories of simpler times when her values, not her wealth, guided her, came flooding back. She realized how much she had hardened over the years, how she had pushed aside her natural kindness to survive in a world that valued power and image. But Thomas's words had reminded her of the person she once was, the girl who believed in the intrinsic worth of people, the girl who cared. She couldn't ignore the yearning to reconnect with that part of herself. Confused and restless, Sophia reached out to a few friends, hoping for guidance. But as their conversations unfolded, she saw how shallow they truly were. They spoke of shopping, parties, and social media, and not a single one of them seemed interested in anything more meaningful. The more they talked, the more isolated she felt. Thomas had shown her that there was another way to live, and suddenly, her world of wealth and status felt unbearable. Sophia realized it was time to make a change. She needed to step away from the socialite scene and seek something more meaningful. Though she knew it wouldn't be easy, the pull for purpose was undeniable, urging her to take the first step toward change. On a whim, she decided to visit her childhood neighborhood, a small town where people knew each other by name and helped one another without hesitation. As she walked through the familiar streets, she felt a mix of nostalgia and regret. She remembered the girl she had once been, dreaming big and filled with kindness, unburdened by the pressures of high society. In that moment, a sense of clarity began to form. She realized how disconnected she had become from her roots, lost in a world that valued appearances over authenticity. And for the first time, she felt ready to leave that world behind and reconnect with what truly mattered. Meanwhile, Thomas continued his quiet life, teaching and guiding his students with dedication. He remained unaware of the impact he had made on Sophia, focusing instead on his classroom and the lives he touched. For him, every lesson, every small victory, felt like a success. Though the gala had been a unique experience, he knew he belonged in the classroom, where he could make a real difference. He felt at peace, satisfied with his path in life, and unaware of the profound journey he had unknowingly set in motion for Sophia. Determined to make a change, Sophia volunteered at a local charity for underprivileged families. It was her first real exposure to the hardships so many faced. She met parents who struggled to provide for their children, but carried an undeniable resilience and hope. These encounters touched her deeply, awakening a compassion she hadn't felt in years. Through this experience, Sophia began to understand the true depth of Thomas's work. It wasn't about recognition or accolades. It was about lifting others, offering hope, and making a difference, no matter how small. The experience left her humbled, and for the first time, she felt a genuine connection to a world beyond wealth and privilege. Sophia's time volunteering revealed the strength that lies in empathy. Each story, each struggle, resonated with her, teaching her that real wealth was found in giving, not receiving. She began to envision a life where she could use her resources to help others rather than elevate her own status. The seed Thomas had planted was now growing into a deep, unshakable resolve. She reached out to the charity, offering to support more initiatives and provide resources and mentorship. Sophia felt a renewed sense of purpose, as though she had finally found the path she was meant to follow. One evening, feeling an overwhelming urge to express her gratitude, Sophia sat down to write Thomas a letter. She struggled with the words, wanting to convey how much he had changed her perspective. Her pride fought against the vulnerability of the gesture, but she knew that this was a step toward the new life she wanted to embrace. In the letter, she thanked him for his quiet wisdom and for challenging her to see beyond her own narrow views. She admitted to her initial prejudice and arrogance, explaining how his words had awakened a longing for a meaningful life. *You helped me see myself, flaws and all. And for that, I am grateful beyond words. *, she wrote, her hand trembling as she signed her name. She sealed the letter and sent it, hoping he would understand her sincerity. The days that followed marked a profound shift in Sophia's life. She began working closely with the charity, supporting projects for education, healthcare, and housing in underprivileged communities. Her days, once filled with social events and status-driven gatherings, now revolved around visits to shelters, schools, and community centers. She traded her designer clothes for more practical attire, spending her evenings planning ways to help those in need. Sophia felt lighter, unburdened by the expectations and judgments of her old life. She found herself smiling more, feeling an authentic joy that no lavish gala or luxury could provide. People who had once only seen her as a glamorous socialite now witnessed her transformation, one that had turned her into a compassionate and driven woman. For the first time in her life, she felt truly happy. Weeks later, Thomas was surprised to find an elegant envelope in his mailbox. Opening it, he read Sophia's letter with a gentle smile, touched by her words. He hadn't expected her to change so profoundly or to reach out, but he felt glad that his words had resonated with her. Inspired by her sincerity, Thomas decided to invite her to his town to see firsthand the impact she could make on a community that shared her new sense of purpose. Sophia accepted the invitation without hesitation. When she arrived, she found herself in a world far removed from her glamorous past. She visited the small, modest school where Thomas taught, meeting the children he had dedicated his life to. Their faces lit up as Thomas introduced her, and she quickly became engrossed in their laughter, their stories, and their dreams. Sophia felt an unexpected sense of belonging, one she had never experienced in the polished world of high society. As Sophia spent more time with Thomas and the community, her own transformation began to inspire others. Old friends from her social circle noticed the changes in her, and though many dismissed it as a phase, a few reached out, curious about her journey. Some joined her at the community center, while others volunteered at the school, each discovering a new sense of purpose alongside her. Even James Harley, the wealthy businessman and mutual friend who had introduced Thomas and Sophia, noticed her dedication. Moved by her efforts, he pledged to match her contributions, launching a wave of support for the project Sophia had become so passionate about. Her actions ignited a ripple effect, transforming not only her life, but the lives of everyone she touched. Sophia soon began dreaming of establishing her own charity, one that would provide opportunities for education, healthcare, and personal growth for those who needed it most. She poured her heart into planning, determined to create an organization that would honor the values Thomas had taught her. She saw it as a way to carry his wisdom forward and ensure that his lessons of kindness and empathy reached even more people. Her charity became a beacon of hope, drawing support from people across the city who shared her vision. Each success, each family helped, felt like a testament to the change Thomas had sparked within her. Sophia finally understood that wealth and influence had purpose when used selflessly, and with each passing day, her commitment grew stronger. A year after the gala, Sophia organized a fundraising event for her new charity, inviting both high-profile figures and the community she served. She asked Thomas to be the guest of honor, hoping his presence would remind everyone of the values that had inspired her transformation. When he arrived, dressed in the same humble suit from their first meeting, the entire room fell silent. His influence, now widely known and deeply respected, was undeniable. As Thomas took the stage, Sophia felt a surge of gratitude. She watched as he spoke, his words reaching hearts with the same sincerity and humility that had changed her life. By the end of the evening, donations poured in, exceeding all expectations. Thomas's presence had reminded everyone of the power of kindness, humility, and purpose. Sophia knew that the night marked the fulfillment of a journey she had never expected to take. Reflecting on her journey, Sophia realized just how far she had come. She no longer felt the need for approval from society, nor the pressure to maintain a perfect image. Instead, she felt grounded in a life filled with purpose, one that honored the values she now held dear. Her friendship with Thomas had changed the course of her life, showing her that true wealth lay in connection and compassion. And as Thomas returned to his quiet life, Sophia felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that, thanks to him, she had found a legacy worth building, a legacy of kindness, humility, and unwavering purpose.